Hallå och välkomna. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, testing, testing. I am number 1. Där kom den. There I am. Good afternoon and welcome. This session is about infrastructure as code in the real world.
And we're going to do it in English.
Yes.
For one particular reason.
Yes, we have an English.
We have a VIP in the audience.
Yes, we do have.
Mikael Nyström. And we have decided to add a demo, especially for him, about WSUS that we will include.
Some MDT as well. My name is Mikael Nyström. I've been in MVP for 13 years. And together with me, I have Markus Lassfolk. And he has only been in MVP for 3 years. Yes, 3 years. I'm also much older. I'm actually really old.
And wiser. And fatter.
Yeah, bigger.
And smaller.
I'm a heavy guy. Besides loving steaks, we also love red cars. He drives a red Volvo.
And he rides something much, much more fun.
Yes, like a red Camaro and a red Jeep Wrangler. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about IAC, Infrastructure as Code. This is a definition stolen from
Wikipedia?
Wikipedia, exactly. Is the process of managing and provisioning computer data centers through machine-readable definition files rather than physical hardware configuration or interactive configuration tools. The IT infrastructure meant by this compromises both physical equipment such as bare metal servers as well as virtual machines. The definitions may be in version control system. It can use either scripts or declarative definitions. Declarative definitions, that is basically decide state configuration. And scripts are basically just PowerShell scripts. Doing it this way means it's going to be possible to repeat. And why do we need to repeat things? If I build a house, I don't need to repeat building the house. I built the house. That's fine. But I might need to repair the house. And if I have an instruction that defines how the house should look like, it's going to be slightly easier. In IT, we don't need to fight with that. We need to fight with something else. We need to redeploy operating systems over and over again. We need to test and verify them over and over again. And we need to remember all the settings that we need to define in Active Directory, in file servers, file shares, permissions, and all different locations. They need to be defined. We need to set all these settings. Let me show you this. Not long ago, I was working at a customer site, and I asked for the documentation. What they gave me was this. A bunch of pictures. Hundreds of pictures describing the entire setup of a system. That's not a documentation. It's a picture. If I take that picture and print it and hold it over the keyboard, it won't happen. Nothing will actually happen. If you have documentation written in a Word document that describes exactly how to click and point in different things, and you print that, and you hold it in front of the computer, and you say, "Go, computer. Do it, computer," nothing will happen, besides the fact that people around you are going to think you're crazy. The only way to actually repeat things is to describe them in machine-readable form. And then we use that. Let's get back to the presentation. As an IT pro, you basically do two things in life besides sleeping, eating, and having fun. You either build things, which is the left definition, get data, pipe to new solution, press enter, and wait. That's one thing. That's building system. You deploy new servers. You set up a SQL server. You deploy something. You build something. Or you maintain things. You fix things. Someone said, we are going to change the DNS address. Why? I don't know. Someone said that we need to change the DNS IP address from this IP address to this IP address. Your task is to change the IP address of every server in your environment. Do you even know how many servers do you have? You have a roughly idea, right? A couple of hundred, maybe thousands, but you don't know exactly the number of servers. The way people usually do this is through this. They use Remote Desktop Connection Manager, connect to 400 servers, and then they open a prompt, and then they paste it. That's actually a good idea. You have a PowerShell script that you paste in for each and every machine. I've seen people running GP update /force on 200 machines by manually typing it in a remote desktop session of 200 machines. That takes roughly a day to do. Let me ask you this. If you can pick and choose by doing one command line, press enter and you're done, takes you 5 seconds, or it takes an entire day of your life typing GP update /force on 400 machines. Which method would you like to do? I think my life is more valuable than just punching buttons. I like to watch progress bars. That's much more fun. So let's talk about working with old stuff. One of the most, and the reason why we picked this demo is because most people know that a WSUS server, they know what it is, they know how it works, and a lot of customers really believe that the only thing you need to do is install it, then you configure the automatic rules, and then you're done. And if you really believe that, you're wrong. It needs caring. Somebody needs to do something. So, what do we need to do? We need to
do some maintenance. We have to keep the WSUS server healthy, basically. And you can obviously keep it running, but it will grow. It will grow and grow and grow. And I'm sorry, a couple of you guys saw more or less this demo yesterday during the pre-conf, but, well, there are a couple of hundred more people here today, so it should be fine. So, a WSUS server. This one, before I ran the script, had filled the hard drive. There was nothing left. There was no space left. And after running the cleanup script, we do have a bit of space left. Another benefit is that also the SQL server is not running at 16 gig of RAM, and the server is not slow anymore. Because one of the issues is that in the old days, you had activated a lot of stuff in the product classifications. You probably had Windows XP and Windows 7 enabled, maybe Windows 8, but when you uncheck these boxes, all the updates will still stay in the database and on the server. So it's just adding more and more and more. There is a cleanup script or a cleanup job you can run with this one, which will delete updates that has expired or been superseded, but you have to run it manually in that case. And as most of you probably know, if you have kept your WSUS running for a year or two, and then you try to run this cleanup script, the cleanup job, it will time out. It will never complete. And if we look at the updates, one way could be to just take all the updates, sort by release date, just add release date, and sort by it. Now we could basically say that, okay, everything that's older than 2015 or something should be declined. But if we look at our stats, that one has been installed 51 times. Let's go back up. That one has been installed 3 times. If I had declined that one, that that update had never been installed on the server. So you might still need really, really old updates, depending on how your infrastructure looks like.
Now, the reason why that could happen is very simple. Let's say that you install an application and you do it manually. You install System Center, Virtual Machine Manager, Data Protection Manager, anything that is written on using C++. Now, if you didn't have the C++ runtimes installed on your machine before you started, the installer actually has a folder with the runtimes in it. It's just that that folder is about 5 years old.
Yeah, that's the RTM version.
Yeah, so it's going to install the RTM version of that, and it will never be patched. Therefore, removing older patches isn't really a great idea, because then you're going to miss. And these security fixes, they are usually very important because they contain holes.
And you see, this one is for report viewer 2008. And if we look at the stats for that one, the stats report, it will show you that it was installed actually on the WSUS server itself even, because it's probably the report viewer that we're actually using right now that needed that update. So we can't just remove everything that's old here. So in our case, we're still keeping like SQL Server stuff, that one, because there might be one component that still needs an update for that one, even if we don't install any 2008s anymore. So to keep this one up and running, we have a PowerShell script that we run each night that cleans up the database. It does a couple of things. Just load the config. Oh, just start it right away.
I think you can increase the size
Yeah, we can do that.
with the slider a bit. Then I can actually see.
Do the older people at the back see now?
Yes?
Good, good. So it's starting by synchronizing the server with the Microsoft to make sure that we have the latest updates, all the latest and the greatest. It will then get all the updates that has not been declined yet, but where there is a superseded update. Something newer has come out that replaces that one. And in that case, it will deny that update. It will decline it automatically. After that, in our case, we don't have any Itanium servers anymore. Do you?
Anybody had any kind of, anybody seen one of those? There's a museum in Stockholm, maybe they have one. I have never seen an Itanium server.
But actually, if you do synchronize the OSS, you will get Itanium services patches as well.
Is there anyone running only 64-bit operating system here? You know, you made a decision. We're going to run only 64. Anyone?
We're running just 64 bits.
So everybody runs 32-bit then? You don't run Windows?
We have one with 64-bit only. 2. Yeah, so in our case, we're declining all the ARM updates because we don't have any ARM clients. I'm actually also declining a lot of updates which has Windows 7 or Windows 8 in the title, Windows XP, and so on. But some of those updates are actually a combination. So it's the same updates that are going to be released both for Windows 8 and Windows 2016, for example. So in that case, we have an additional rules that says that if it's a Windows XP patch, but not 2016, then it's going to be declined. If it still applies to 2016, it will stay. Cool. Here we have. It's running. Deny WSUS updates. Update rollup 3 for some reason. And then we proceed. Unfortunately, the WSUS team made a small, I would say, feature, localization thing. So all the titles are shown in your localized language based on your regional settings. So in my case, I always add regional settings to Swedish, even though it's an English OS. So the name in PowerShell will have the localized name, while if I look at a patch in the WSUS client, it will be in English. So we have to keep both the Swedish name and the English one. We don't have any Windows 10 XPs, so decline everything like that. Decline all beta, decline everything that's SharePoint, multipoint, the Windows 10 N edition. Do we have any Windows 10 N editions deployed in your environments? The Windows 10 without media player? No? Oh, we do have one. That's actually worth a t-shirt.
Do we have a t-shirt?
Yeah, so after the session, step forward and you're going to get the t-shirt. Excellent. Oh, Michael is coming.
I'm going to randomly find people and throw them t-shirts.
Yeah, we need one of those cannons that you can...
Which one? I didn't see. There you go. Thanks.
So it's going through a long list of rules that we have defined, of stuff that we wouldn't like to have deployed on that we don't need anymore. And after that, it's actually running the same kind of commands that we had in the GUI, in the UI here for the cleanup. Whoops. But the difference here is that when you run it from the PowerShell, it will not time out. It will complete. Even if it takes hours, it will still complete, which is good. And in the end, it will tell you how much disk space were saved, freed, and it will also do one additional thing, which the tool inside the WSS client does not do. It's going to defrag the SQL database to make it work better. So I guess that most of you might have some kind of WSS maintenance script. There are like a zillion of those on internet. And let's make sure there is another one, an additional one. WSS maintenance script for TechDays audience, publish. Oh, wonderful. Here you go. So if you need that one, you can just go to my blog and download it. You might need to modify the rules a little bit to apply to your environment, but there you go. Do you want to continue?
I can. I can. So next up is what we defined as hydration. Hydration was invented by Microsoft many years ago, and the idea was to automatically build environments, test environments, lab environments. Now, we've been using this for many years, and we basically work with two versions of this. One, using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and LightTouch, and the other one is just PowerShell. The PowerShell version is used for building customer environments and lab environments that includes Windows Server and the entire System Center together with Azure Pack and whatever we need to have. The other solution, which is based on LightTouch, is used for building lab environments with Configuration Manager. If you want to play with this, you can download everything on GitHub. But it basically means that when we need to build a system for a customer, we work in XML. We define the entire environment in XML. Names, passwords, IP addresses, user accounts, domain names, everything is defined in an XML file. Then we read that. Then we have a PowerShell script that runs through the building process, reading the information from PowerShell. It takes approximately 4 hours to build a data center. And the only thing I do is that I enable a PowerShell function that plays the ta-ta sound. That way I can sit in my chair and sleep. And when I hear 12 tatas, I know that 12 server has been built. And since I defined 12 servers, it's now time to wake up. And then I can continue working. Anybody want my job? Just sleeping the entire day, listening to tata? So let's look at that. Let's start with the XML file itself. Now, we're not going to run through all the lines here, but you need to understand how to work with XML files. There's a lot of things you don't need to do, but for instance, it's pretty smart to use identifier like this, as well as the name object. We have settings, customers, and customer. Even if I only use one customer, it really doesn't matter. The point is that the structure of the XML file is the same, regardless of it's a server or a customer or a name or whatever it is. So we define the customer. Then we defined common settings, like the local password, the domain name, things like that. And then we define things like product keys, which you can't see. You're not allowed to. We define all the networks. We define the domain. And we define all the servers. This is, for example, the domain controller. It's active, computer name, the VM name. It should be deployed as first server. When it's done, it should reboot. We need to wait for this deployment to actually finish. That's the amount of memory the machine should have when it runs in production. That is the amount of memory we need to have when we build the machine. That means I can adjust the amount of building memory for the machine I'm building everything on. And before we put it in production, we change the amount of memory. Number of CPUs, specification for the server itself, roles. Here's a role grid number. If I find that, you have the role described here. And the role is the configuration for a domain controller. We have 3 configurations for this: a common, first, and last. So if I define this as to be the first domain controller, it will actually create the domain. If this is the last one, it will join into the existing Active Directory. I can have any number of lasts if I want to have that, but this makes it possible to build clusters or anything that needs to be multiple of them. And we have a bunch of these roles, like 2. That's not really a bunch, right? We have others as well. Here's the DHCP, stuff like that. So we define everything like this. It really doesn't matter how you slice this, but it's pretty smart to put it in this. Is it possible to use a comma-separated text file? Yes. Don't try. We try that. It doesn't work. Now, the interesting thing is that you can actually define your entire infrastructure in an XML file, and then you can use that to have all the settings every machine should have. That way you can actually control and say, I want to check my existing infrastructure against this XML file and see if there's anything that doesn't match. Whoop, yep, here's a service that runs on that machine that shouldn't run that because we didn't define that machine to run. So that's the idea of an XML file. We have one XML file for each customer. The hydration itself basically runs on a few scripts. So here's a lab for the Data Center Geek Week. It has a bootstrap file that runs locally on the hypervisor. The bootstrap file itself checks that I have all the resources. Do I have the switch I need? Do I have the ISO images? Do I have the VHD files? Do I have all the resources I need to build this? It's like checking if you have all the stuff for the recipe before you actually start making the cake or something like that. Then we have the script that runs that. Then we have the deploy, and then we have the XML file. So if I go to the deployed lab file, it just reads everything from the bootstrap and the XML file, set all the variables, and you don't really need to do this, but there's a good reason I do this. It's for troubleshooting. When we goof around this, it's easy to see what all these settings are. So that's the name of the whatever. Here's the log paths, for instance. Here's the VM location, which is set to the following path. Build in that folder. Here's the bootstrap. Checks the location of the ISO. Stuff like that. I usually disable verbose, but just for the fun of it, so everybody can see what's going on. We're going to do that. And then we have a bunch of functions. It's just to make it easier to run the code. A good idea when creating functions is actually this. The first time you create scripts and you realize that you're using a name that everybody else is also using, you're going to get angry because you want to create a new VM function. Well, there's already a script, well, a function built into the operating system called new VM, so it doesn't make sense to have that. So you need to have another name. You need to find another name. So we use VIA, which stands for Via Monstrum, for basically all the functions we have. Because there's no way that Microsoft ever will create a function in the operating system called new Via VM. Maybe they're going to do a new Contoso VM, but that's it. Don't use Contoso either. That could be used by someone. Then you run the script. I'm not going to build that machine, but I'm going to build this machine. This is a very simple NAT server. And hopefully this is going to work. If you look at the deploy fabric server, this is basically a PowerShell-driven task sequence. It reads all the data, and based on condition, it does things. Now, when I look on these scripts, and every time I do that, it strikes me that, oh yeah, we do that. Yeah, that's good. We fixed that as well. And yeah, we set that setting as well. We do a bunch of things that I even can't remember we are actually doing. So when I come to a system which was built manually, there's a bunch of things that doesn't work. I was like, yeah, I need to fix this. So I basically have this PowerShell script to fix any given server, just to make it usable. You don't need to do this, but it's a pretty smart idea to be able to automatically build a system. One reason to use this, every time there's a new version of Windows 10 and there's a new version of Configuration Manager and you want to test that, you need to build it again. And that happens 2 to 3 times a year. I can't imagine you have the time to do that manually. So we use this. If you want to have this, the magic word is deployment, bunny, GitHub. And you're looking for the following things. You're looking for the hydration v10. Here's all the scripts. And you're also looking for the function folders. Here's all the functions. And you're also looking for this. That's the sample company, fabric-via-monstra.com. Take this, make a copy of it, use another name, and you have your own domain and your own Active Directory. And you can add your own roles and remove whatever you like. So when we build real systems, usually takes a week or two, the actual building process takes less than half a day. The rest of the time, it's just about explaining how it actually works. And customer needs to know that. We talked about this yesterday. Most people using PowerShell figure out one way to do things. After a while, you realize that there are multiple ways to do the same thing. The most common command we use when we build system, and even when we manage them, is the invoke command. Now, this is a very traditional invoke command. The invoke command is going to return the value to $return, and we're using VM name, which means that we use PowerShell direct to connect to the machine, and we use a script block. That means that we actually connect to the machine and we run whatever is in the script block. Now, if I want to have parameters sent into the script block, I need to have a param section, which I have. Param, $role, and then we need to add argument list in the end. It's basically a function. That's a very common way to do it. However, you can also do it this way. In this way, I define the script block before we send the command into the invoke command. Since I'm defining my script block before, I can now use parameters that is set and created on the host operating system. And then I send them in by using option type. So instead of doing the calculation on the destination, we now do the calculation of the command on the host side, which in many cases are much easier to do. Another way, which is something we talked about yesterday, is actually that if you have a script, and the script does everything you want to have, there's no point of copying the script into the machine. In this case, the script is located on the host machine, but since we specify file path instead of script block, we're going to send the file into the machine and run it inside the machine instead. That means that if you have ready-made scripts, they're going to work remotely without copying the files. I have a bunch of customers that really go for X-copy all the scripts to all the machines because they can't figure out how to do network access because that requires CredSSP or Kerberos redirection, and that's messy to do. So instead of spending hours trying to figure out how to copy all the scripts, you just copy them on the fly when you run the command. This is not a training in PowerShell, but what you need to understand is that you can find many ways to do the same thing, and you should explore and try them all until you figure out which one is fitting your needs. Here's another one for creating credentials. The only way I can access a VM is through credentials. You don't need to have credentials when you're logged on and you do an invoke command directly to a computer name because it's going to grab your inherited credentials. Now, this is a very simple way to create credentials. When you do this, don't leave your computer. Because if you do, anyone with PowerShell skill can reverse these credentials into clear text. That's pretty bad, right? That's like, I'm buying ice cream again. When we do things, we build. When we have built, we need to maintain. When we need to maintain, the first obstacle is always to get data. I need to know things. How many have seen this? Reliability history. Anyone has seen this before? It's from Windows 7, right? And this is a Windows Server 2016. What does it say? That I'm a bad admin? Yeah, pretty much. Here's all the blows up and the crashes and whatever that happened. But it gives you a number. It gives you an index. What can you do with the index? Well, if you could grab this data from a central location and you can collect it, then you can reverse this list and say, give me a list of all the servers that have a reliability index that is below 7. Because if it's below 7, it's a really bad machine. Now we have a list to work on. Because everything that has an index that is above 9 or 10, we have no issues. And if we go back to the slide deck, it says, find issues. And the only thing I want to know is what's bad. I don't really mind having good servers, but I don't care about them because they're good. They do what they do. And gosh, I wish there was a command called get this, but there isn't. But I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. Another one is old certificates. If you believe that certificate is automatically managed in Windows, it's not. They are there. And if you have an organization, you're going to have a bunch of bad certificates that needs to go away or be replaced or being updated. Anybody remember back in the old days, we did the Exchange server with Outlook Web Access, and every year Outlook Web Access stops working because the certificate is broken. And everybody would go like bananas, like, oh, the certificate is broken. Yeah. It actually did happen last year at this exact time, actually, exactly this time, actually, in minutes. Put a calendar schedule and remember this. Another thing is that our CEO asked us for, what kind of operating system do we actually run in our data center? And I said, I have no idea. Well, we need to know that for licenses compliance. When do you need to have that? Could you send me a report in like 5 minutes? You can have it in 6 minutes. Okay, so we need to have that. We use storage. We use Virtual Machine Manager, and we play around a lot. We have that luxury of playing. That means that we need to move around. I mean, our data center is actually a production data center with us in it. That's a really bad combination. We're going to add new storage. We're going to add new hardware. And what we do is move around things. So I invented a script that's basically grabbing everything that is on that cluster and moves everything to that cluster. And then I can watch Netflix. When we build labs at Lab Center and deploy them, we have Blade servers. Like one rack of Blade servers. It's kind of nice to have. Noisy, but nice. In the beginning, we actually did use a connector, power them on, hit F12, and deploy each machine. At that time, I was skinny and fit, and I could run. I can't do that anymore because nowadays I sit at home and I run a PowerShell script and say, deploy lab. And then I play World of Battleships, warships. So we have a bunch of these gets. Are you ready to do a certificate lab?
Absolutely.
Thing?
Switch that one, thank you.
I'm switching. Here's the switch.
So it's pretty easy to get the expired certificates on one server, like that. In this case, show all certificates that expires in less than 800 days. It's a couple of certificates, no rush, we do have time. But if you would like to do that on all servers in the environment, first of all, get all the 80 computers, and then we add a category to get all the servers. And we don't want to have the cluster objects and other things, to just get the real server objects. So get all of those. And we just get a list from the AD of all the servers. In this case, I've selected to just work with the hosts because it's such a long list, it will take time else. But just to make sure that the servers are actually running, because this is getting the AD accounts from the AD. And we could potentially have turned off a computer or server and it's not active anymore. But the account still exists. So we're making a ping to all the servers, and yeah, we noticed one was not available. We get a list of all those, and then just run the same command up here on all the servers, but in this case, I'm actually defining that it should be, come on, scroll, less than 90 days. Michael, are you downloading something? It's awfully slow.
Look, no hands.
And in that case, we then get a nice, neat list of the servers that need a new certificate. So it's pretty easy to work across all the servers with just a couple of lines.
Yeah, but if you want to have that as a report, can you do a report of that?
Yeah, we can make it into a Power BI. We could send it as a mail, anything.
Could you do like an Excel spreadsheet with pie charts?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The only thing you need to do is download the Excel PowerShell module, import that, and then you figure out how the Excel spreadsheet want to be. Can you Twitter that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you have a Twitter account.
Exactly. So what you need to do is that you download my Twitter as a PowerShell module, and then you can Twitter in every PowerShell. So I'm thinking of doing that. Every time we build a data center, we could do that for every server we build. Michael has built server number 1, tweet. And then we just repeat that. You're going to get so annoyed, but it's actually possible to do.
I'm just going to do another quick, small demo, which is also pretty nice. When we build data centers across the globe, sometimes we build them in Sweden, sometimes in Norway, sometimes in the States. So far, none in Australia, but we're still hoping. So what we would like to do is that the domain controller, the primary domain controller, should synchronize the time with an external time source. That's how it should be set up. In this case, it's synchronized with poolntp.org, which is like a global list. I would like to define that a little bit better. So we do have a script which does 2 things. First of all, it's possible to read information from a group policy and also set the information in a group policy. So in this case, get the group policy, which has the name of something called PDC, that's the PDC emulator group policy, get the registry value for the server, and it tells that the poolntp.org. Next one, based on this data center's external IP address, we will use the free geo IP service to get the location. It says that we're located in England, in UK. And we will just update the information. So in this case, get the same, but in this case, set the registry value. And if we now query that information again, it's going to use the UK pool as primary source, and if it can't get any responses, it's going to fall back to the global one. So that's like one of the post-configuration steps we use when we build data centers. But we try to build them as dynamic as possible, so, so to reduce the hard-coded information.
I've been working with operating system deployment for, I don't know, forever. And one of the critical things is that you either need to type in information, you need to feed whatever solution you have with information. But as much as you can, remove the feeding of information from getting the information and doing calculation. If whatever script you create have the ability to figure things out, you don't need to specify it. And the less things you need to specify when you automate things, the higher success rate we have. I mean, have you been to like one of these hamburger restaurants where you can pick and choose and numerous of different options? Number one, it takes forever to order. Number two, it's not always easy to figure out exactly what you have. I would like to have like like one button says hamburger. Click. It's really hard to miss that one. There's not many options, but it's going to be easy to pick and choose. You want a hamburger? Yeah, that's going to be fine. So,
and in this case, you see that the regional name and the code and city and zip code is empty. It all depends on the IP address. Sometimes that information is populated as well, and you can use that one.
Let's talk about this for a while. Here's a good example. How many of you have ever seen this list? Anyone? Yeah. So where did you see the list? Was it on a blog post, on a Twitter feed, or something like that? Or a document? Anybody knows what it is? Exactly. These are all the services that shouldn't be there when you run the desktop version of Windows Server 2016. That has been documented. It's actually on Microsoft Docs. So you can find a list of recommended services to disable. Now let's say that you actually have your environment. Everything is running, and the thing that happens when you log on is that you always get this, when you open a server manager, it says the following services is not started, and gets a red annoying thing. You go like, okay, so I don't mind about that. After a while, you realize that you can't use Server Manager for anything good, because it's always going to complain about a bunch of services that is not running, and they shouldn't run, or they can't run. These are all user created services. For instance, the OneSync services is going to synchronize all the contacts you have in Outlook on your domain controller. If that is working, your domain controller is not configured correctly. Because if you have Outlook on it, it shouldn't be there. So the only thing you want to do is very simple. You want to turn this off on every piece of... And you can do that using group policy, right? How do you verify that group policy works? Well, it's going to take a week, and then you realize that, yeah, it kind of works, but it didn't work on the following machines and stuff like that. So even if you can use group policy, I prefer to actually do it this way. I have the same thing as Markus have, this one. We're grabbing all the computers from Active Directory with all the properties and all the filters because I can use it later on. I specify only servers. And then we run a result for each server in servers, run test connection, and that spits out a result of everything. And if I run this one, it now says, just return the one that TCP test succeeded is true. And what I do is that I check the WinRM port, because that's remote PowerShell. So now I know that, yeah, everything that actually does answer is online, and it does accept remote PowerShell commands. So we can run that, and it spits out this list. And now I can run this one. That's a for each job. If you have 400 servers, it's going to take a while. Don't put any burden on the system. It's going to take a while. It's going to work. Is there any other way to run this? Yeah. Instead of doing it that way, let's take a copy of that. Modify it. Session equals new PS session, computer name. Now the computer name is going to be buried inside this. And if I run that, it's going to give me an array back. I only need to have the computer name, so dash computer name, sorry, dot computer name, and that's going to be the computer name. There you go. So let's create a session against all these machines. And then we run invoke command against session PS, sorry, session. Script block. Because now I have an open session to all these machines. Session script block services, yeah, there you go. And it gives me, crap back here, the red ones. It's like, oh, couldn't find that service. It was already disabled. Yeah, I'm an IT guy. I'm the only one that needs to see this. If I want to have this pretty, I would do a check for if this service exists. If service blah, 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 and so on and so on. But I don't want to do that. So that did take long, right? That's about 40, 50 servers. If I want to do that on a couple of thousands, maybe I don't want to do a PS session to all of them. Maybe a for each loop would be better. What else do we talk about? Yeah, let's do that one. Software inventory. How many of you needs to inventory software of your servers? Anyone? Yeah. Anybody using Configuration Manager to do that? It's pretty neat. It actually can do that. How many of you know about this command? Get seal data. It gives you all the licensed software on the machine, including the identity of the machine and including the host it's on, including the hardware configuration. Has anybody seen this command before? 1, 2. Okay, the total number is 2. When did it show up in Windows Server? Windows Server 2012. Yeah, 2 t-shirts. It's actually 1 blog post. It is about one simple thing. It's about making it possible to inventory licenses on all the servers without having anything. You can, if you want to, set up a SQL server with analytics services and configure all the clients to report to that server. It's a built-in software inventory system for being license compliant. And it's been around in Windows Server since 2012. And we had 2 people that ever heard about this. And if you start Googling for this, or, sorry, Bing, it's a Microsoft conference, everybody Bings. Let's run this command and see if we can find this. Exactly. All the 56 results in the entire world. I would say this is not a well-known command, and still it has been in the operating system for many, many years. I'm impressed that some of you actually did know that. There's a couple of articles about this, and you can actually use this. I use another script. called Get Installed Software, because this finds everything. This is something I downloaded from Microsoft, from the gallery, actually. It's pretty neat, it's pretty simple, and the only thing we do is this. We do the same thing. We verified all the machines that are online. Then, for each machine, we grab the information over the network. We get the 80 computer properties from Active Directory, installed software, get services, we get seal software, computer identity, and we put that in a hash table. We export everything back into result. That means that if I actually run this, let's see what's in result right now. That's the wrong one. Let's remove this to make it faster. There you go. So now we're going to get one object back called $result that contains all the machines, all the software, all the hardware, all the services, everything you want to have in one object. And the only thing you need to do now is actually run this. It grabs the data and it creates an inventory file for each and every machine. So if I go in here, I have now a list of all the software, all the services that are running in the system. And this took me about 10 minutes to fix. My CEO was fine. I said 6 minutes. He was fine with 10. Can you imagine doing this manually on 250 servers? I can't. I don't have the time. Sorry. Other things we do. This is the Department of Weirdness. This is how we deploy things. So here's an XML file that describes the lab I want to run. It defines the first server and the last server and the ID of the lab. Here's the entire PowerShell script. Bunch of modules. We then connect to the MDT database because we use the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit database as the entire configuration of Lab Center. Everything is in that database. And everything that is not in the database is actually synchronized using PowerShell from another web server. We have a function for setting the power on all the machines and the UI mode. So I can set that. Then I specify the lab names, and I can do a for each loop. And let's do that. For each lab names, and it's going to run the S2D lab, which is 19 to 29. And then we do this. Sorry, we didn't do that one. Need to do that one. Go ahead. And then we run this. So it's going to show me the folder so I can verify that, yep, that's the right one. And then we actually run this. Updating the database, injecting all the new values, turning off all the machines, power them on again, flagging them as busy, deploying the machines, and then it's going to create a monitor, and then I can use a web page to see that all the machines are being deployed.
So what we would like to kind of get into is the mindset to try to automate as much as possible with PowerShell, if you haven't already started. And I totally understand that some of you might have felt that this was like Latin, And some of you might feel that, okay, this was nothing special, because you're already doing it. So it's hard to find a good balance.
It is.
But the thing is that you really need to start working like this. If you're not doing it already, it's almost too late. If you're going to keep up with the releases of Windows, both the server and client, with Office 365, with Azure, with everything, you really, really need to start automating things. You can't keep on working manually like you have done in the past.
There is no time.
No. And if your colleagues are still doing the clickety-click, you really have to push them into PowerShell as well, or into automation. And as you can see, there's a zillion different ways to do things. We have shown you a couple of things, and this is how we do it. I'm sure there are other ways as well, but this works for us.
Yeah. So you really need to figure out a way to do this. Now, with that said, we're pretty much done, right?
Yeah.
We're pretty much done. Thank you so much for stopping by. And if you do have any questions, please come up and we will have a chat later on. Have a great Tech Days. Goodbye.